Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kerzner.
Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul Kerzner. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now. And I want to thank you wholeheartedly, deeply, and sincerely for joining me in this most beautiful and present moment. The topic and title for this podcast is Words That Affect Our Present Moment. Over the years, through the hundreds of patients that I've had the pleasure and honor of working with, one of the greatest challenges that I've seen faced is that people, and myself included, use words and aren't aware of the power that they contain. Sometimes we speak unconsciously, or sometimes people just speak to speak because they don't like silence, whatever it is. I wanted to take some time and put together a podcast that addressed a few words that contain a lot of power that we need to use a lot more carefully. One of the words that I like to hone in on that I feel affects our present moment, oftentimes negatively, is the word permanent. Permanent is a word that is nonsensical. It makes absolutely no sense because nothing is permanent. You know, a permanent marker isn't a permanent marker. Eventually that ink will come off. Everything is constantly changing. And that is a message that I like to relay often, is that nothing stays the same. So that we use this word permanent, and it really only serves our ego, but really it means nothing. I mean, nothing is permanent. Everything is changing. Nothing is staying the same. But why do we use such a term? You know, when we use a word like that, it has the ability to pull us out of the present moment, because if we're conceptualizing something as permanent, what we're starting to see it as is something that will always be there, something that will always exist. And it shoots us into the future because we're basically putting that word, putting that term, that identifier, that descriptor onto a person, place, or thing. And we're looking at it as something that will always be there, that it'll always exist in the future. But that's actually not true, because nothing is permanent. And I just want to take this moment to really explain that should provide you with solace. That should provide you with a reassurance, because the understanding that everything is changing means that even if you're involved in a situation that doesn't feel good, it's not going to last. And that really gets filed under the acceptance of the present moment, because permanent is a term that needs to be negated from our vocabulary, or at least used more carefully, and only for a very select few things. So now's a good opportunity for you to think about how the word permanent, is a term that you might have to really reassign, or at least address in your life, and think about for a second. Say, wow, nothing is static, nothing is permanent. And that just means that there's a fluidity in life, that everything is flowing. When we use a word like permanent, it's a very closed word. It's a very closed term. It just shut things down. Oh, this is permanent. It's going to be like this. No, that's not the truth at all. And I'm here to tell you that it's time to let go of such a strong term that really doesn't make any sense and has no validity in this reality, in this world that we're currently incarnated into. So let this be the first word that you start paying a little bit more attention to and using a lot more carefully. Another term that I like to use, that I like to address, is perfect. Perfect is a word that is used commonly and, almost too frequently. we want to idealize perfection. We want things to be perfect. We want a situation, an event to be perfect. We want everything to go off perfectly. But what does that mean? What is perfect? Perfect is this subjective concept that exists in your head. But when we start holding people, places, and things up to this concept, up to that unattainable level, all we do is create a self-inflicted suffering, because nothing is perfect. Perfect is a word that creates an unreasonable level of expectation. And perfect is also a rather closed-off term in the sense where it has the ability to take you out of the present moment, because your idea of what perfect is based on a past concept, a past experience that you're now holding towards a present or a future experience. And so when we realize this, when we think about this word perfect, we understand that, it has a lot of power. It's a powerful word. But it's also a word that needs to be used sparingly and carefully and precisely, instead of using it, freely. Because perfect is a word that is a presence distraction for sure. And my suggestion to you is that, when looking at the word perfect, that you try not to use it, because it just sets this tone. And, if we're really working on being present, we want to use words that feel better, that are open, that bring about presence, not a word that creates an unreasonable expectation that sets us up for being disappointed. Because at the end of the day, nothing is perfect, and that's the beauty of life. And with those two words, permanent and perfect, by changing them or reframing them or eliminating them, that's the start of an awakening of how powerful words can be. So we want to use words that feel good, that are open, that create a sense of presence and make us feel better about ourselves, that are not closed, that allow for the flow, for things to change and grow. And this podcast, this opportunity for me to speak on this topic is so important, because we have to take stock of the reality that we're creating for ourselves. So why would we use words that don't feel good? Why would we use words that take us out of the present moment? And the truth is that we consciously wouldn't, but that means that a lot of times we're speaking unconsciously. And when we speak unconsciously, there's a good chance, there's a good likelihood that you're just not being present in the first place. Another word that I like to address often is the word problem. A lot of times when we're talking about stuff that's going on in our lives, we identify with problems. And problem is such a negative descriptor. It's such a negative term. And it's one that I like to catch my patients using often, because I feel like the word problem is really like a closed term, definitely takes us out of the present moment, and is definitely an opportunity to reframe so that we can create a more open experience. And that word opportunity is the word that I like to replace problem with. If we can reframe all our problems and look at them as opportunities, we can go through life, and instead of identifying negative experiences, we can use those experiences in a more positive way. So as you're describing an event or your life or a memory, whatever it is, stop talking about problems. Just change the word for now. Use the word opportunity. Opportunity is an open word. It feels good, and it gives you a chance to learn, to grow, and to succeed and to prosper more than anything from an experience that you had. Because at the end of the day, all the experiences that we have, have the seeds of growth within them. And if we label them as problems, we're shutting that opportunity down to learn. So let's reframe. Let's reframe all of our closed words and use more open words. Opportunity is a great place to start. So again, let's use words that feel good to us. And one last topic, one last subject that I want to present in this podcast as we're talking about words is a type of humor that some people tend to use, which I personally don't find funny, but I understand why it's employed, is a self-deprecative humor. This is a type of humor that people make fun of themselves. They joke about themselves. I can think of nothing less funny than making fun of myself. And people do it for a number of different reasons. But, you have to think about why would you ever make fun of yourself? Why would you ever use yourself as the butt of a joke? Why would you ever use your words against yourself? Since words are so powerful, and since we're really exemplifying that in this episode, if you find yourself making jokes about yourself, I would strongly suggest that you stop doing that first and foremost, and then think about why you think that's appropriate. There are plenty of things that are funny in life, but why would you use yourself as the subject or the topic of a joke at your own expense? You can talk about yourself and you can build yourself up. You could talk about all the wonderful opportunities and great things that are happening in your life, but a type of humor like self-deprecative humor, to me, is something that I suggest not be used. It's definitely, when I pick up on it, when I'm working with patients or I'm out in public and I hear people using that type of humor, I understand it because it's a defense mechanism, or it might be a way to relate to other people. But again, I can think of far better things to talk about that are way more funny. So if that's your type of humor, I would strongly suggest that you might want to reframe that, because self-deprecative humor is also a presence distraction, if anything. You're making jokes about yourself that have to do usually with the past, stuff that you've gone through. And being present is all about honoring who you are in that moment. And when you're doing that properly, you only see the beauty of your spirit, the beauty of who you are, of who you could potentially be. My hope for this podcast is that I've addressed the topic that is applicable and relevant to you. I do believe that words are relevant to everyone. And I think that there has been a bit of an epidemic where we've become a little disconnected with the understanding of how powerful the words are that we use, how powerful we are as manifestors more than anything. And with all that being said, I want to thank everyone who has listened to my podcasts, everyone who has helped to support the Presence Projects. I want to thank you, the listener, who has joined me in the here and now. I want to thank the universe for making this all possible. And I want to welcome everyone back to the present moment.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.